All right, so we all know what we're here for, and that's to kind of think a little bit more about the questions that we ask ourselves and how they influence our lives. So I subtitled our workshop, Finding the Change That You Need to Have the Life That You Want. So kind of a big order, but I think that when we really start looking at how we think and the questions we ask ourselves, we will find that change is more easily found than in other ways. So our takeaways for today will be, first of all, understanding what question thinking is and how it impacts your life, empowering your observer self. We're going to discuss the mindsets, both the learner and the judger, and then also talk a little bit about identifying when you're in the learner mode versus the judger mode. So question thinking, and like I shared also, and I wrote a couple articles and did a couple videos on, but when I first heard that we think in questions, I was kind of not sure that I believed that. So listening to my internal chatter, I usually hear statements, not questions. I'm not sure about you, but it was something that I realized that as Katie and I were talking, we talked about the fact that actually we're hearing our answers and not the questions. So when we think about question thinking, we definitely are thinking in questions. For example, what we're wearing right now. We didn't just walk to the closet, pull it out, and put it on. We ask ourselves a lot of questions. What's the weather supposed to be like today? What am I going to be doing today? Really, there's a lot of questioning going on in your mind all the time. Most of us are not aware of our internal questions, but definitely I think we're more aware of our answers than our questions. And so part of what we're going to be doing is talking about how to make that shift so that we become more aware of our questions, so we can make better questions and find better answers. So question thinking is how we think with the questions and how the form of our questions affect our life experience as well as the results that we get. We're going to be pulling information from Dr. Mary Lee Adams, and she defined question thinking, and she developed the concept after an experience that she had herself, where she had some negative criticism from a professor in college. And when she had received negative feedback in the past, she had immediately got defensive and really upset with herself and just kind of put it off, wasn't willing to take it and learn from it. When she had an experience where she actually listened and moved into a learner mindset, then she found herself being able to change. So that caused her to do a lot more research and a lot more thinking about questions and how the questions that we ask ourselves can then affect our lives or give us different results. So you can take charge of your own thinking moment by moment by moment by becoming more aware of the questions that you ask yourself. And you can definitely move from a reactive state to a mindful and intentional state by designing new questions to be able to get new results. So question thinking is also a set of tools that will help you make that shift, kind of going from one place to the other. And so being able to take charge of your thinking, your emotions, and your behaviors will not only help impact, obviously, your job and your profession, but every area of your life. Because when we take that reactive state out, it changes the way that we're interacting with those around us. So when I was thinking about my questions, one of the examples that came up was just weight. All of us have that fun thing to deal with and have a tendency to kind of let weight creep on. I know for me, as my life's been really hectic and living in both places and taking care of my dad, it's been something that I've let a little bit more creep on each and every year. And every time I think about, oh, I really need to do something about this, the questions I was asking myself were like, what else can I cut out? What else can I change? I don't know how I can do that. Immediately, I went into this place of just reacting to all the things I would have to do and feeling like I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. Well, this last spring, I was talking to a friend and she asked me different questions. And she said, well, what if it was easy to be able to do that? I'm like, well, there's nothing easy about that. And I said, I just don't have the bandwidth to think about everything that I put in my mouth. I just don't want to put one more stressor on my plate. And she said, what if you didn't have to? What if you were able to just make that decision ahead of time? So the weight loss program that I've gone on is one that I drink shakes. And it's worked really well for me because of the fact that I don't have to think about it. It's not a question that I have to ask myself. What am I going to have for breakfast is already decided. And so The only question I have to ask when I go to eat is, do I want strawberry or do I want vanilla? So it helped to eliminate and totally change the directions of my questions because I had totally different questions to ask. And so with that, then I've been able to find success in being able to lose the weight just by going about it a totally different direction. So our questions are very always happening inside of ourselves, but the key is, can we then find better questions? By asking ourselves the best questions, then we'll find the best answers. And we can totally shift our perspective and move into fresh new ways of looking at problems. And so definitely that's going to help impact every area of our life. So one of the first tools that Mary Lee Adams talks about is the observer self. And the observer self, all of us have one of those. We don't use it very often. That observer self is just putting yourself in a mindset of observing. And one of the things that came to mind as I was thinking about this is my career before coaching. I owned a Sylvan Learning Center and managed other people. And so one of the things as a manager you get to do is evaluations. And I don't know about you, but that's really not a fun part of the job. Most people don't like to receive an evaluation. And honestly, it's not a whole lot of fun to do evaluations. And what I found as I was working with my employees is that if I actually changed my role and didn't think of myself as evaluating them, but rather thought of an observer and just recorded what they were saying and what they were doing, then I could remove myself from the judgments and the things that were happening in the moment and just record what was happening. By being able to be a recorder and an observer of the situation, then when we sat down to go over their evaluations, I was able to talk with them about exactly what their words were. And by replaying them, what they had done, what they had said, it almost became then, here's what I'm grading you on, what would you give yourself? And so because they could hear from an observer's perspective what they were actually doing, it became a lot easier to do evaluations. So if we learn to put an observer hat on and think of observing what's happening in our own minds and in our environments, then that will totally shift how we are reacting in the situations. So when we think about our observer self, we want to change. First of all, we need to decide where we're coming from and understand, where we are. And from that starting point, then you can better learn to observe and become more effective in being able to make the changes. The better you see what's going on, the better you can apply the right skills and strategies to make the changes that you want. So the more you develop your observer capacity, the more in charge we become of our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, and the less likely we are to be controlled by people and circumstances around ourselves. And definitely when just that statement right there, the thought of being able to control our thoughts, feelings, and actions makes a huge difference. But when we also move into realizing that by changing what we're thinking, we can also not be controlled by people and environment, that's huge. That completely changes how we live our life. So we need to really empower our observer self. And we're going to do that by detaching from our own thoughts and feelings and beginning to hear the questions that you're asking yourself. So instead of being in the moment and feeling everything that you're feeling, it's putting the observer hat on. So visualize your observer hat and stepping back to just think about what's going on in your head and be able to start thinking about what you're thinking, the questions that you're asking yourself. So when you empower your observer self, you'll need to strengthen it by becoming more aware of what's happening around you, carefully observing what's going on through your mind and your body without taking action in the moment or becoming attached to the thoughts or feelings that you're experiencing. So this is a really important skill that we're going to actually be practicing over the next couple weeks, because that starts to put us in a place where then we can start making a shift in what we're thinking. So thinking of the observer self and putting that observer hat on and allowing yourself to almost visualize your thoughts kind of floating past you, not being attached to them, not allowing any emotional response to them, but just letting them be there and be aware of what they are. So that will bring us into mindset. And most of us have heard of mindset. Carol Dweck, well, I'll give you the definition. The dictionary definition of mindset is that it's a noun. It's an attitude or disposition or mood, or it's an intention or inclination. So when we think of our mindset, I usually think of an attitude or disposition, the way in which we kind of receive what's happening around us. It might be different than what other people perceive in that same setting, but it's the way that we're perceiving it. Carol Dweck was the inventor of the term, I guess would be the best way to put it. And she, kind of a quick summary of mindset, she has the fixed mindset, which is consistent and doesn't change. Usually leads to a desire to look smart, or having other people's opinion kind of drives that fixed mindset. The growth mindset comes from a desire to learn. So it's changing and growing all the time. So from Carol Dweck's research, and I do highly recommend her book, Mindset, but it is a little more technical than Mary Lee Adams. And so that's why I chose to go with Mary Lee Adams. And she uses the same basic concepts as far as the learner mindset and the judger mindset. And so that's what we're going to kind of be focusing on through our workshop in the couple of weeks that we're going to be working on being able to change our questions and change our life. So the learner and the judger. We're going to start out by kind of talking a little bit about the judger mindset. Some of the key things to be aware of with the judger mindset is it's automatic and it's reactive. It's just being without thought, that being sucked into something and reacting to it. It's blame focused, and it's always win-lose relating. So in relationships and in just any type setting, it's more of a focus on win, lose, and blame than it is on anything else. So we get sucked into it, and oftentimes when we're living in our judger mindset, we find that we can easily get kind of stuck in a pit. That video that I shared where you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off, it kind of sets that pace for the day, that everything that happens then becomes that negative. You're automatically blaming, you're automatically losing, or feeling like everything's against you. That's your judger mindset. And then your learner mindset is a thoughtful and choice-driven mindset. So you stop and think, and you make choices instead of getting drug into something. You're solution-based, so you're focusing on solutions, and you're looking for win-wins. So you're relating to those around you and things that are happening in your life in a win-win type situation. One of the things as I was preparing for this that really stood out to me was, again, as I've shared, taking care of my dad, having different caregivers in and out of the house has just been quite a challenge. For almost 4 years now, we've had a variety of different people. And there's one caregiver in particular who's actually been with us for a really long time that I really struggle with. And it's just hard for me to be around her. And when I started looking at mindsets, I thought, now I see she is a judger. Everything that is happening, she is reacting to. And she is always blaming. Nothing is ever her fault. So if she doesn't give him the right medication, there's something else that happened that caused that to happen. She's always looking at trying to protect herself and look good, and not necessarily focusing on, in my opinion, my dad like I would like her to be. So I realized that, oh, wow, this is why I really struggle with her, because it's always focused on that blame or on that reaction versus being able to stop and think and be able to process through. Whereas it's funny, I have a little gal that's there on Saturday mornings. My sister and I were talking about the fact that she never has problems with my dad. She's always so positive and everything's so great. And I laughed and I said to Robin, I said, you do realize that she has problems with him, right? And she's like, well, no, she always says everything was just great. And I'm like, it's great, but she still says, can you take off your shoes 15 times? I said, it's not any different for her than it is for the one that has the judger mindset. It's that the one that has the learner mindset is always looking for different ways to try to help him be able to solve this problem. She's looking for the solutions, and she's looking at a win-win situation. She's saying, as long as we're able to accomplish it, it doesn't make any difference how long it takes us to get there. And so she's really refreshing to work with, because she's always really looking for, can you help me with this? Or what if we were to try it this way? She's looking for solutions versus blame. The other thing that I thought was really interesting as I was thinking about this process is one of the things that we found was their feedback was so different. And it was kind of difficult to really know what's going on with Dad whenever each person's the way that they're seeing life influences what kind of feedback they give. So we had just kind of open-ended forms where they filled out whatever they wanted and wrote whatever they wanted. And we got to talking about, well, I don't really know what it means to say he had a good morning. Does that mean that he ate all of his breakfast, or does that just mean that he ate some of his breakfast? And, so Robin and I stepped back and put on an observer hat and made a form. And the form now says, how much of his breakfast did he eat? 80%, 70%, 60%, which has also not only allowed us to step back and look at it from an observer side, but it's helped us to have our caregivers look at it from an observer perspective versus that immediate reaction. So we get really specific feedback on what's happening and how he's doing by having more objective type questions asked. So that shift has happened. Not that we've changed necessarily their mindset, but we've at least got a little bit more feedback that's in a really easy way to understand it. So being able to look at mindsets and understand and identify what mindset you're in is going to be really important. And you're going to have that observer hat in order to be able to do that. So I'm going to open it up at this point and have you shared, are there any situations that came to mind as I was talking about the learner and the judger mindsets that you've experienced? Anyone?
I'll probably do a lot of judger mindset towards my children. I don't really ask much questions. I've already decided what their problems are. Yeah.
Easy to do.
I would say definitely the judger mindset has been present in my classroom. Just like, we go through making lesson plans and we think that, or we hope that the lesson's going to go through this way. And then we know that kids are not black and white. People are not black and white. And so, of course, the learner mindset is more flexible, and I like how you were talking about the win-win situation. Like, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I was directly relating it to the concept, but like, it doesn't matter how long it takes for them to get the concept or how we get the concept, just that they mastered it or they understood it. And so, I can see that very clearly. The two different perspectives and how that can affect the classroom environment.
Great. Yeah, Katie teaches first grade, so most days don't go anything like planned.
Exactly.
Anyone else have a learner or judger experience? Are you feeling pretty clear on the difference between the two?
So.
Okay. I'm looking for head nods. I am looking at you.
Raina, one of the things that I'm sitting here thinking about, and if I think about this longer, I may have a different answer. So next time we meet, I might say something different. But as you're describing this, and thinking back to when Alan was in the hospital and all of the pressure and all of the stuff that is coming at us, it's hard to be in a learning mode. It's almost like you've got to have more energy. You've got to be more intentional, and there's a learning process. I mean, it's almost like you need to train yourself to be and to stay there, because it's easy to go back to the default of judger mode.
Definitely. Definitely.
Not even thought involved.
Yeah. Great. That's a great catch. And one of the things that when I was planning this and I was looking at the concept, I was like, this book has so much in it, but you can read it and it can go in one ear and out the other, and that's it. So when I designed it as a 2-part workshop, that was because I really felt passionately that we need a couple of weeks of just wearing in the observer hat and going, okay, that was a judger reaction. And okay, this is a learner reaction. And just finding ourselves where we are. One of the things just to encourage you is that Mary Lee Adams said, our natural state is judger. Most people live in judger 100% of the time. And the good news is, she calls it in the book, we're all recovering judgers. So the good news is, it is going to be a process, and you are going to find yourself spending more time in judger than in learner. But the first 2 weeks, we're just really going to be thinking about, where am I? And then we will talk about, as we get into it a little bit more, how do I switch? But just identifying it and seeing it and becoming aware of our internal questions is going to make a big difference. So you're going to have grace with yourself, but the goal is definitely to just see where you are, and the odds are good you're going to be in judger more than you are in learner, and that's okay, because we're going to learn. We're gonna learn how to get into that learner state and learn how to find how to find solutions, how to find win-wins, and how not to be reactive. Okay, any other questions at this point? So the next thing we're going to do is kind of talk a little bit about how to move in, how to identify which one you are in. So you're going to use your observer self to hear and feel the difference. So what I want you to do is kind of identify which mindset you're in, and being able to do that, we're going to start with, I'm just going to read some questions, and I want you just to listen. I want you to notice how you feel, any sensations within your body that you might feel, or what you're thinking as I read these questions. So I have 2 sets. Here's the first one. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? Whose fault is it? How can I prove I'm right? Why is he so clueless and frustrating? Haven't we been there before? Haven't we done that? Why bother? Okay, so notice how you feel, how kind of there's any feelings that you have within your body. Now here's our second set. I want you to kind of compare those. What do I value about myself? What do I appreciate about him? Am I being responsible? What can I learn? What's useful in this situation? What is she thinking, feeling, and wanting? What are the best steps forward? And what's possible? So when you compare the two, what things came up? What did you notice?
The first set's very annoying to me.
Okay.
Makes me feel annoyed.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first set.
Yeah, irritating.
Okay.
Kind of feel it in my gut.
Yeah, just kind of, it worked you up a little bit, didn't it? Mm-hmm. So how did those questions compare with the questions you think are going on in your mind?
For me, the first set of questions, I felt my body tense up. Like I could feel it in my posture. And so, thinking back to just these past couple of days in different times when I have felt that tightness in my body as well, just feeling my muscles tighten up. I kind of realized that I was in the judger mindset fairly often.
Definitely. So it kind of makes you irritable when you're just hearing the questions. It made you feel that irritation. You're kind of on edge. You're just ready to react, right? You're ready to go. I'm gonna make something happen. Whereas when we're sitting in the judger place and the questions that we're asking ourselves are learner questions, then it's more, what can I do? How can I move forward in this? What's possible? You're just immediately feeling more at ease, not on edge. Mm-hmm. So the goal of this was to kind of then feel realize how you felt when you heard those questions. And then just what Katie said, if you're feeling that in your body in the next couple of weeks, the odds are good you're in the judger mode, right? So when you're feeling more relaxed, you're feeling more like you're exploring possibilities, exploring opportunities of doing something differently, then you're in the learner mode. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now that we have a better understanding of that, what our next step is to be able to get to a place to identify the learner and judger, so we can eventually get into a place where we are able to change those feelings. So the quote that I pulled out from Mary Lee Adams was, "With judger mindset, the cost can be tremendous. The future can only be a recycled version of the past. And with the learner program, the power is on. The juice is flowing, and you can actually make a new future for yourself." So realizing that, I really liked that, the thought that when we're in the judger mindset, because we're fixed, we're already decided this is the way it's going to go. I'm either winning or I'm losing. We're just replaying the same thing over and over again in our lives because there isn't any change. We aren't looking for anything different. But when we move into the learner side, then we actually have the opportunity to change our future and make it a new future and change what the past patterns have been. So I really liked that quote in just realizing the opportunity that's there because of making a shift from one to the other. But throughout this week and a half, we're going to have you just take a look at, keep in mind, keep the observer hat on. Even when you're feeling the judger feelings, I want you to stop and put that observer hat on and think about the questions that you're asking yourself. Remember that you're in a judger place if you're in automatic reaction mode, if you're placing blame or you're focusing on blame, and if there's a win-lose in that situation. You're in the learner mode. Again, we want to know when we're in learner as well. So stop and put that learner cap, observer cap on and think. When you're thinking of choices, you're looking for opportunities to find choices. You're being thoughtful about what you're going to do in each situation. You're solution focused. You're looking for ways to make things better, and you're looking for a win-win. That feel doable?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? I went faster than I thought I would.
So, Raina, you've done this
Mm-hmm.
in your observer mode. And so as you were doing this, how did you track your thinking?
Good question. I think I picked up on physical responses first. So whenever I was feeling irritable, or whenever I found myself being a little snippier, or, and like I said, just even as I was looking at this, thinking of how I deal with the caregiver who bothers me, I realized that I probably have a pretty judgmental mindset towards her. And so I feel immediately when I interact with her, the first thing she does wrong, I'm judging that. And so she has no grace in my world. And so that just really began to convict me of that, of, okay, I need to look at how to help her be more solution-oriented versus reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also made me understand why I prefer some of the other caregivers, because they are solution-oriented, they are offering solutions. And so I think my first step was probably realizing my physical response when I was feeling irritable was stopping and going, okay, what am I thinking? How am I thinking right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then as I move into, or on the same end, whenever, a situation comes and I handle it well, it's stopping and thinking, why am I handling this well? What did I do? But stopping and taking that deep breath helps with that observation right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think as well, at the end of the day, reviewing, because in the moment, it's a lot harder when you first start. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't catch yourself during the day, then stop at the end of the day and go ahead and review your day and think about what happened. How did breakfast go? What happened in the morning? What happened next? And just stop and think about this, but just through your day, and be an observer in that way. Try to step into it and say, okay, what was I thinking at that point? If I, even something as simple as dropping, my son dropped the ketchup today when we were at McDonald's, he just dropped the ketchup and, oh, well, I just made a mess. Even that reaction wasn't as bad as you know, calling yourself names or reacting, well, how stupid is that? That immediately when you go into the negative and call yourself names, then you're in that judger mode. You're immediately judging that action and that it's a good one or a bad one. It just happened. It wasn't a big deal. No one else would call you stupid for dropping the ketchup, but sometimes that's our first reaction to ourselves. So just putting ourselves into those situations and kind of see, okay, how am I going to receive that? What am I going to do about it?
Yeah. You make a good point there, because part of this judger and learner, not only with other people, but the self-talk to ourselves.
Huge. And because we're all, you know, faith is important. I know each of you personally, so faith is important to all of us. I think, honestly, when we really put the truth into it, spiritually, what does the Lord want us to be? He wants us to be able to grow in every situation. Everything that we're experiencing in life is growing and growing in our relationship with him. So our response of calling ourselves name or is not what he would want for us. And so I think oftentimes when we're self-evaluating, we can also ask him to show us, you know, Lord, help me today see when I'm in judger mode. Help me, you know, Spirit, let the Spirit come right in and say, okay, this is your judging. This is your judger mode. There's a win-lose right now. Let's find the win-win. I can see everybody's wheels turning. That's kind of fun. Any other questions?
I just think a lot of this happens for me when I'm spending time with God. I hate any kind of emotional unrest in my soul or any kind of irritation, anything that feels negative. I can't stand it. So I got to figure it out because I want it out of my life, my mind and my heart. And so I process a lot by journaling. And I think God, the Spirit of God is always taking me to the learner side and helping me become aware of, you know, what I need to change and how I need to move into a better place with. It's usually, you know, it's always around relationships or something. Or so he does that. I haven't labeled it this, you know, but he does that. He takes me from column A to column B a lot. And if he didn't, nobody would be able to live with me. Probably couldn't live with myself.
So, and ultimately our goal is to be getting to a place where that's happening faster. And sometimes that will be happening faster with just the questions we ask ourselves. So I think the Spirit's going to bring those questions to our mind. But ultimately, you know, the next time we get together, we'll talk more about what we call switching questions, which moves us immediately from one to the other. And I know usually when I'm needing the Spirit to get on top of me about it, it's taking longer than it should. Kind of like with this person, you know, it's one of those things that it's like sandpaper in that situation, but it's like, how do I switch it right here in the moment and not have to come back later and be the whole, I'm sorry, I was kind of ugly. If I can avoid the I'm sorries, that'd be awesome. If I can stop it before it gets out of place. But I agree. I think it's definitely the process that I saw that, you know, the Spirit is wanting to do in us. So all of this will equal spiritual growth. Definitely.
For me, when I started listening to what I was saying to myself, because I've been working on this for a while, not necessarily in these terms, I was surprised at what I was saying. It's like, oh my gosh, I say that? So it is a lot about awareness.
Well, and I've always said, anytime I hear anybody say anything negative about themselves, I'm like, don't pick on my friend like that.
Mhm.
Don't say that to my friend, because you wouldn't say it to me. So you certainly shouldn't be saying it to yourself. But it's the ability to put that hat on and realize what exactly is going on up here, because there's a lot going on up there. And just because we don't say it out loud doesn't mean we need to be saying it at all. So learning to hear it and change it.
Mhm.
So I have things set up. I don't know if anybody else, Katie and I walked through trying to log on. It was a little bit more of a process than I thought it would be. So if you've not logged on to Take Heart Coaching yet, let me go in. What I found out was that I did not assign passwords, and that made it more difficult. So what I'm going to do is make everybody's password a simple one. We'll just do TC or TQC fall. And I will go in and set that for you right now. TC fall, and I'll just, we'll make it all caps T. I'm sorry. Okay. Writing it down and saying it wrong was not helpful right now. Okay. So T, like think, question, change. TQC, all capital. And then we'll do fall because it's almost the fall. So fall is in capital F and then ALL. And that will make it where you can log into my website. I will send a daily reminder to check out the website, but there'll be just questions and little nuggets to think about. Not more than a minute to log in and read one little screen. And then we have some worksheets just to kind of go through and just ask you questions on how you're doing in the process. That sound good? If you have technical problems, please holler at me. This is new. And so Katie got to work out some of the glitches, but immediately I figured out what I was causing problems with. I think Becky's been on already, right? So I won't change yours, Becky, because you already have your password set. So,
yes, I do.
All right, good job. There were more steps to get in and do that than I wanted it to be. So I will set everybody else's password to that, and then you can change it to whatever you want. I just thought that'll be easier if you have one trying to log in. So, so there'll be daily things there. There's a little forum where we can have conversation back and forth with other people about the process. And, but there's going to be some exercises to help build your observer self that are listed there, just to kind of some opportunities to kind of try some new things with just observing. So, and then
What's our username? What's our username supposed to be?
your username should be your email address.
Okay.
And I have not changed your password yet. So.
Okay, so it won't work. I'll try it.
Yeah, sorry. We just figured it out before I logged on, and I was like, this will be easier if I do it this way. So I will do that immediately when we're finished here, and then that way you can log in. And I did ask you to introduce yourself, but since we had time to do that tonight, you don't have to worry about that part. But then tomorrow morning, your first lesson will pop up. It just has a little bit of review information in the worksheet for the week. So, pretty simple stuff. Any questions? Good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. With 2 weeks, we'll get back together again. And like I said, between these 2 week time, we'll be doing mostly observing. About Wednesday, the week before we meet again, no, probably Thursday, the Wednesday before we meet again, I will get you the switching map just so you can start looking at that and kind of start thinking about then experiencing the switching. And then we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that as we're together, of how the switching is going and how you're spending your time in judger versus learner and how that compares to when we first started. So, great.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.